The race for the #1 seat in the 2023 general elections is getting intense, with aspirants crisscrossing the length and breadth of the country. While some drop from the race, parties are weighing their options on who to put forward for Nigerians to make their decision. But with political parties under pressure to nominate their candidate within the timeline and the controversy hanging over new provisions in the electoral law, it is unclear who stands to win or lose. It's a make-or-mar situation for many of the aspirants and candidates. But to what extent will the new provisions impact on the country's democratic process? This is the issue in focus on the program today. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thank you for joining. Now, prior to the presidential assent of the amended electoral law, the controversy was about the mode of conducting primaries for political parties. But with that laid to rest, a new section demanding the resignation of political appointees to be eligible to vote or be voted for in party primaries or congresses also became a controversy. As members of the executive disagree with the legislature, the Federal High Court in Umuahia, Abia State on March 18 declared Section 84, subsection 12 of the amended Electoral Act illegal and ordered the Attorney General of the Federation to delete the section. This follows request by President Muhammadu Buhari for the National Assembly to delete the section, as it will deprive political appointees of their right to vote and be voted for. In another turn of events, the Court of Appeal voided ruling of the High Court, validating the controversial provision. It held that the Federal High Court, Umuahia, lacked jurisdiction to have adjudicated the suit. In the meantime, President Muhammadu Buhari has directed that all members of the Federal Executive Council running for elective offices to submit their letters of resignation, some of whom have complied with the directive. The federal government has also dragged the National Assembly to the Supreme Court, the apex court in the land, over the provision, seeking interpretation of the clause. In a new amendment to the Electoral Act 2022, proposed by the both chambers of the National Assembly to allow statutory delegates to participate and vote in party conventions, congresses, and meetings, is awaiting assent from President Muhammadu Buhari. Statutory delegates include president and vice, governors and their deputies, local government chairmen, councillors, among other elected officials. With all this happening, the Independent National Electoral Commission has vowed not to extend the June 3, 2022 deadline for primaries. According to INEC, any change in the June 3 deadline will affect other activities for the 2023 elections. The timetable and schedule of activities released by the Commission are derived from the Constitution, the Electoral Act, and the regulations and guidelines of the Commission, INEC insists. Now, joining me to discuss this is the Program Officer, Center for Democracy and Development, Austin Ayegbe. He joins me in the studio to talk about this. Thank you for joining us on the program.
And thanks for having me.
Well, it's quite interesting having you. The issue surrounding this new electoral law, it seems like there's just one issue after another. And I don't know, are you concerned about how tricky this is becoming, even as we approach party primaries?
When in your introductory commentary, you mentioned that political parties are under pressure to field their candidate. I don't think they're under pressure. They're just playing politics. That's what they know how to play best. So when INEC released the timetable for the 2023 election, it wasn't 2 weeks ago. It wasn't a month ago. It wasn't even 2 months ago. It was immediately after President Buhari assented to the provision, the repealed law, Electoral 2022, INEC immediately, within 24 hours, announced the new date for the presidential election. and then within 48 hours, release the timetable, and the timetable were pasted across all of the INEC offices in the Federation, and including on their website. So it's not pressure, it's political calculation.
But, you know, it takes a lot of consultations, you know, and, you know, agreements, disagreement within political parties to be able to make certain decisions, isn't it?
So that was when you were not ready. I'm saying that it's not pressure. For example, the political parties have moved, majority of them, particularly the ones in position of authority, they've moved their party primaries from some 2 weeks ago to last week, then to this week. If you check what's happening, no one wants to sell off their football players. What is happening is political calculation. If APC goes ahead to run and elect a candidate for the election, for instance, they get someone from the Southwest, the PDP is going to use the political calculation to say, well, what's our best chance? So what the parties are doing is to continue to shift these primaries. I tell you, the primaries will hold June 2nd, in fact, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So that it will be very impossible for anyone to go outside of it. Everyone is waiting for political parties for losers to show up, and then they move out to other political parties. That's what's happening, and that's what's happened consistently. If INEC shift the date, let's say from June the 3rd to the 30th of June, by the 29th of June, they will still not be ready.
Okay, now, with this, you know, legal tussle about Section 84, subsection 12, how is it compounding the whole situation, and is it going to have an impact on the process itself?
So that's the yes and no. If eventually the court rule and say, well, you can stay in office 30 days to election, going by the Constitution, that's if the Supreme Court agrees with the executive. When I say the executive, it's actually the Attorney General of the Federation, not necessarily the entire executive. We know what happened with the Abia judgment and how the Attorney General hurriedly tried to delete those sessions. It was clear that he needed to run for office in Kirby, and that's clearly what's happening. Apparently, he wants to run, and there's a conflict between someone in the Senate who also wants to run for the position. Each one is using their own political power and political bargaining factor. That's what's happening. If that didn't happen, no one will be talking about Section 84-12. Now, the matter is before the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court rule that it already will have an idea by the appeal court judgment, by the appeal court opinion, that, well, they think, even though it was not part of the judgment, they think, it's an opinion made, they think that it is anti the Constitution. So if the Supreme Court eventually aligns with that opinion of the appeal court to say, no, it's anti, no, don't, it has to be 30 days before the election, it means that there will be anarchy with the date. Then, those who have been pulled out from the race will then need to appear before the court again. You can't just, Supreme Court will not tell INEC to suspend action. Supreme Court will not tell INEC to hold on or shift the primaries. So there need to be another level of proceeding that will then maybe go from appeal from the first court to the second, and then maybe Supreme Court. That may be in another 6 months. So we're actually headed towards an anarchy state if the Supreme Court says, no, this is what should happen. What is in Section 84-12? We have discussed this again and again. You cannot eat your cake and still have it.
But, I mean, the concern of the president here is that, you know, it deprives these political appointees the right to vote. I mean, so it's understandable if you say, well, because they are in some kind of political office, they should not be voted for. But again, what about their own right, as provided by the Constitution, to be able to vote in an election?
So that we have argued that time and time again. So when you are the president of Nigeria, your appointees are over 1,000. Your appointees. The president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is the highest employer of labor. Special advisor, senior special advisor, all of them across the federation. If they are all delegates, what it means that anyone that opposes the president's candidate will lose an election. So if the president fields all of his candidates, it's same thing with the governors. So if they have commissioners, special advisors, and of course local authority chair and co-chair, vice chair, if they fill up the candidate position, they become almost immaterial to contest to have a free, fair primary process.
So you feel that once you are a political appointee, you shouldn't vote in a party primary?
So when you are not, so this is where the argument keep coming up. It doesn't mean that you are a member of party to be appointed a political appointee. It doesn't mean that the president picked all of his appointees from the party. No, it doesn't mean that. So to say, the president has the sole right to pick his so-called workers. They are his workers. It is the president that is employed by the Nigerian people. Then the president then employ others. We don't know by law, minister.
So in essence, what you are saying that this is about, checkmating the influence of people in power to be able to influence elections? Is that what you're saying?
It is to give a level playing field for everybody who wants to run at the party level. I think that's the wisdom I saw in it. No one competes with the governors at the state level. Once a governor says this is a candidate, that is a candidate. You know why? He's got all of the voting powers. All of the delegates who are his appointees, they outnumber the ad hoc delegate, they outnumber the statutory delegates. Talking about party executive, they outnumber them. That's why I told you that the president, imagine that almost 2 per state ministers. So you have about, give and take, around 60 ministers. If it's 2 per state, some not 2. Let's say you have about 60 ministers. Meanwhile, the total number of delegates for the election is about 2,000 plus. The president, only ministers. Then the special advisors. Then it begins to negotiate with the governors. Then the governors have the same number. If the governors now work with the president, or the president work with the governors. We always say in this country that the governors are too powerful, that when they sit in one room and agree, the president has no choice but to come down. Look at what happened with the APC, not national election, the executive, the convention, yeah. And you saw how within 24 hours, someone showed up and it was a presidential nominee, and every other person needed to shut out, and the governors took advantage because President Buhari wanted this. So President Buhari said, no, the only thing I need is just this one. So the governor said, okay, no problem. They went to their state. Okay, I also want this one. Everyone just...
So in any case, in all of these amendments, now with the issue of statutory delegates also coming into the picture, it looks like if the Section 84 subsection 12 will not be reversed, then there's another way of sneaking in this whole arrangement. Going by what you're saying.
Yeah, what is happening now is, I think we need to get to a selection process that is fair. One of the reasons why political parties have challenge with nominating a fair candidate, a candidate who eventually produce for the greater good of the people, is that they are loyal to a certain number of people. So when they realize that their loyalty will then be to the Nigerian people, there's a way their orientation may change. I'm not saying will change. So when some individuals sit in one small room and negotiate and allocate positions to consensus and all of that. The APC have done a fantastic job, just to put that by the side, I don't know if this is true, but people say it's true, by adding an addendum to the nomination form. An addendum where the notary public form, where you have to sign, where you have to withdraw, literally ahead of your withdrawal. So if you then say, no, you are not withdrawing, they go to court and flag that on, you already withdrawn. So you don't have locus. So the Electoral Act says, any party using the consensus candidate, every aspirant of the party must write written consent to withdraw from the race. So what the party is doing is to be strategic. To say, well, before you submit your nomination form, so if you don't bring that notary public form, they won't accept your nomination form. So they is actually working towards a consensus candidate, wherein if you make any kind of noise, they tell you, you know what, just relax. You already have already withdrawn. So And maybe the person will be crying, I bought the phone for 100 million. I wasn't given fair chance. No, you were given fair chance. You also have the opportunity to go to court and suspend that form to say that is not part of the nomination form. And then the court will decide. But nobody has done that as of this time. I don't know, maybe someone has done it, but it's not in the public domain.
So the statutory delegates thing, how do you see this, having an impact on the whole process as well?
So in every election, you are going to have some level of statutory delegates, even in conventions, in the democracy we model as after the US, you're going to have, but the US model is more like a direct primaries where each state run their own elections. So you see, if you follow election in the US, you see candidate moving from state to state trying to talk to party members. And they all come out of vote on a certain day and then they collate. But in this case, nobody wants to run direct primaries. And that was why the direct primaries initially proposed in the Electoral Act was shut down. That you cannot push party to the corner to insist on direct primaries. That would have been the best form of candidate selection process. It would have been, but there was stronger argument. Okay, fine, let's do this. But if you must run indirect primaries, these are the threshold you must meet in an attempt to enhance the electoral process within the party. We're talking about internal party democracy here, where, in quote, the owners of the party determine what happened. Don't forget that members of the party don't usually pay their membership form. So one state governor or one special advisor to whoever pays everything allotted to the state. So it determines who are the, during election, primary election officials sent by the state to those local, subnational level of the state. You see the governors want to take charge of them. After all, we run this party. You don't pay. So we pay these dues, so you don't have a choice. But it's changing now. Look at what's happening in Abia State. It's changing. Look at what's happening elsewhere. It's changing. People are beginning to question those narratives, to say, no, we cannot follow like this. The governor, yes, the governor is the leader of our party. It is not in the constitution.
Yes,
but see what is happening also in Edo State.
Exactly. That's basically what's bringing all the crisis. When we see, parallel congresses in states, factions here and there, is because of some of these problems. The governor feels, well, I fund, whatever is happening in these states and all of that. But we'll talk more on this when we go on this break, and then when we come back shortly, the show continues. Please stay with us. All right, thank you for staying with us. And if you're just joining, you're watching Issues. I have in the studio Austin Ayegbe, Senior Program Officer from the Center for Democracy and Development. And we are talking about, party primaries and all of the issues associated with the ongoing, controversy about some sections and provisions of the Electoral Act 2022. Now, around all of these things is the issue of funding for political parties. One of the major issues why we've always seen crisis in political parties is because, certain people considered leaders of the party, want to exercise some kind of level of influence on the political parties, and oftentimes it brings about crisis. Others who feel that they have been making contributions to the party, are suddenly being neglected because, there is this big man pumping in a lot of money. But again, sometimes you really cannot blame, some of these people because they put in a lot of money in it, isn't it? So state resources, goes into, funding of political parties and all of that. Can we ever move away from that? Is it possible?
It may be difficult because usually it may be difficult because of the kind of system we run. Elsewhere, when you donate money to the party, it reflects, it's known. So when you may remember the case of Jackson, Senator Jackson, who was jailed for eating campaign fund of the party. It won't happen here. So you see party like the ruling party raking in over 2 billion naira, and the way the 2 billion naira is spent needs to be very transparent, and there has to be accountability. When that won't happen, of course, here, and that is why funding of political party will continually be within the cabal, the cartel, who runs those parties. Ordinarily, it is not the 500 naira party members pay that runs party at all. There must be real donors who pump money in. And that is why when you are elected and you have ministers, your nominee, your political appointees, they make sure that those political appointees send in some certain allowance to the party for party running and all of that. And that is also why when you are elected as president or governor and you prefer a certain candidate to become your appointee, the party will tell you, no, we don't want him to be there because the funding to the party will be limited, because they know that once you are commissioner or minister for works or this, certain amount of money goes to your national office, it goes to your state office, they will tell you you are taking our state allocation. I mean, every state should have a minister. So you are taking their state. So you have to fund the state party. And that's the problem. So each of those nominees, like I told you earlier, it's not compulsory that the elected official will pick his nominee from the party. And they are now forced to then join the party and acquire party cards. When that happens, the person who joined the party 20 years ago, 10 years ago, who has never been politically appointed, who has maybe never won an election, is incapacitated. Whereas you have contributed to the party, but that contribution is almost nonsensical because it is not financial. So the man or woman who was appointed, maybe brought in from the US or the UK, become a party member 2 days ago, 3 days ago, become a delegate. Whereas the person who has been in the party from the beginning is not a delegate. Isn't that unfair? So those are the kind of dynamics that comes in, that you don't, because you are a political appointee, you automatically make you a delegate. There should be processes. And that's why personally, I support the movement, the provision of law as passed by the National Assembly, as signed by President Buhari on that day, 25th of February, that this is the way to go. Everybody seems to agree with that pathway, that if you want to run for an election, pull out and face the election. You cannot be making money in Snowbelger and then you are also working elsewhere.
Okay, there are those who have put up the argument that, okay, if you say political appointees should resign, what then happens to those who are in elective positions and are also interested in other offices? You know, I mean, what is good for the goose is good for the gander as well, isn't it?
We didn't elect them. So, like I said, President Buhari is working for us. We appointed President Buhari to be president of Nigeria. Then President Buhari appointed his aide. So we didn't vote for those ministers. If we do, many of them will not be ministers. So it's clear. So President Buhari can fire. So when President Buhari is going to sack a minister, for example, why won't President Buhari come to Nigerian people? Nigerian people, should I sack this minister?
Okay, but what I'm saying is that in the same vein, you know, talking about a level playing field, right? You also have, say, maybe serving senators or serving House of Reps members who
elected.
are also, yes, elected.
They were elected, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, and they also now maybe are interested in another office, an office of the governor, right? So here you have a political appointee who have decided to obey the law and resign, right? But you have this other, you know, lawmaker, a senator or House of Reps member or a governor who also now wants to be a senator, but he's still having that same office, right? Now, in that sense, would you say that there is a level?
No, there are legal provision for all of this. So there is when you are elected into an office, it's tenure based. That is why you see staggered elections in Nigeria. What led to the staggered election, which began, I think it was in Anambra, where Peter Obi had done some term and they said the term is over and there was going to be an election. In fact, it was truly an election. And then Senator Uba won and spent about 13, 14 days. And the Supreme Court ruled that no, Governor Peter Obi had not finished his term, that his term began when he took oath of office. These are foundational, they are issues of law. Whereas for the Senate or National Assembly, it's a calendar year. So even if you came in 6 months before the end of the calendar year, you are out. However, you could approach the court that certain individuals deprive you of your 4-year term and you want to take the salary or something, the court can decide. So when you are elected, it is different from when you are appointed, because when you are elected, it is the people who elected you, not someone, one individual, sir. One individual who determines your appointment. And that individual can also sack you. But for an elected official, it goes through a process of the Constitution, which is called the recall process.
Okay, now with the short time that we have left for parties to go into their primaries, how can we speed up this whole processes to ensure that there is no political crisis, if you may, talking about the new proposals in the, for the electoral amendment, and also the court issue that is also before the judiciary?
So number one, INEC will not go back. INEC will not go back unless there is a judgment of the Supreme Court that will force them to then go back. For the now, 27th of February is the election. Election timetable is cast in stone in the Electoral Act. However, if the Supreme Court then says, no, this is illegal, then you have to then go back to status quo, and they can then move election from February 27 to maybe March and have the governorship election in April. Don't forget, May 29th of 2023 must be handover date. June 3rd is that of National Assembly, or June 3rd or so, or 7th, is that of National Assembly. Statutorily, it should happen. If that happens, we are going to have a constitutional crisis. Not necessarily a constitutional crisis. We are going to have a challenge with the 1 year, 6 months of campaign, which may not be an issue. Everybody can then come to the table and say, we agree. We agree that it is 6 months. 6 months began, but let's do primaries are within the 6 months and still continue. Nobody will go to court. I don't know if that will ever happen. But a state where people are seen to come together and agree that nobody will charge INEC to court for this provision of the Electoral Act. Don't forget, tomorrow, one political party, not APC, maybe not PDP, one political party go to court and say INEC did not follow the precept of the Electoral Act 2022. Then the court will also agree and say, well, that election you did on March 10th, for example, is non-void because you did not follow the provision of the law. Then we are back to status quo.
All right. Now, what about the proposal, the new proposal of statutory delegates? Do you see this affecting it?
I want to look at Mr. President eyeball to eyeball. Do not sign that provision. It is an afterthought. If it was important, it would have been in the amendment process that lingered in the heart for too long a time. If you remember, Mr. President, we even criticized you that you refused to sign an electoral act, and eventually you signed. With all of the pressure that happened, the media advocacy, the protests that went in, all of the things that happened, we were like, we forced you, in quote, to sign. And now you have signed. Suddenly, someone is bringing, it's an afterthought. Please do not sign it. Let's wait for the 10th National Assembly. If they wish to amend the Electoral Act, so be it. This time, we must not tamper with the Electoral Act. We must move forward what already exists and run an election that will be credible, effective, and efficient of integrity. All
right. Well, thank you so much. A good place to end this. We appreciate you coming on the program today.
Thank you very much.
All right. We've been speaking with Austin Ayegbe. He's Senior Program Officer of the Center for Democracy and Development. Well, that's it for the show. You can watch more on our YouTube channel and also connect with us via all social media platforms. My name is Ayuba Ilya. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.